everyone. Welcome back to the chat, the place where you want to be heard, understood, and have that conversation that you know you've been wanting to have. So, today we are joined by, of course, the lovely, lovely, lovely host of the show. I am Prince Michael. We also have the Tokyo, the stepologist Regina Platt, and not last but not least, the beautiful, pretty girl that wear her 20 pearls, Ebony Saunders. And we're also joined today by a very special guest who is very near and dear to my heart. She is a friend of mine that hails from the great Bethune-Cookman University. She is a licensed therapist here in Georgia. She services the entire state of Georgia, as well as having her own business for the past 5 years, y'all. Okay. This is my friend. Okay. So y'all better make sure that y'all are watching this at home. We are pre-recording this because when y'all actually see this, Tish and I will actually be in the Dominican Republic. Okay. That part. So I wanted to introduce soon to be as of next year, licensed therapist Tish Woods.
Hello, hello, hello. Oh, I feel very appreciative that you all have given me this space to be on here tonight. This is beautiful. I'm excited. So, it's always very special being able to kind of just talk mental health, because mental health is like really a dear and near thing to my heart. So it's so funny. Everyone thought I was going to be a writer. So everyone thought I was going to be a writer growing up, until I took an intro to psych class my junior year of high school. And everything changed for me at that moment, because it was the first class that I ever took that I actually felt like I could apply to my life. Like, I understood myself better after taking this class. I understood those around me better after taking that class. And the rest is history. I was like, that's it. My major will be psychology. And I was determined to go on the path of becoming a therapist from that point. And so I've thoroughly enjoyed the journey, and mental health has become a very major passion of mine throughout the years, because it's just so necessary. And it wasn't until that I got into this field that I realized how taboo mental health is. Sometimes just hearing the term mental health shakes some people up and gives people certain thoughts and things that come to mind for them when they hear that term. And sometimes it's not a good one. And so when I realized that there was this major taboo, especially in the African American community, at that point, I realized like that was my duty at that point, to then share the good news of mental health, but more specifically mental well-being, because that is definitely where my passion lies, is to spread mental well-being and get people to a place of wholeness and mental wellness. And the thing with that is it's a difficult one. It's a difficult journey. I didn't think how hard it would be to try to get people to help themselves and heal themselves. You would think that that'd be something that people would jump at the opportunity to do, but unfortunately, it is still such a tough battle trying to get people to want to heal themselves and to enter into this thing of therapy. I've realized over the years that there's still this mystique about it. People still don't really understand like what happens in the therapeutic space. And I think that scares people. You know how we are as humans. Anything that we aren't truly fully aware of, anything that leaves a little mystery, we just kind of downplay and we leave it there. And I think that mystique to therapy has also kind of kept people from it. I think the other thing is that people fear the idea of what is on the other side of healing. For so many people, they've been broken so long that has become familiar for them. That has become all they know. So this idea of healing sounds good, but still very unfamiliar. And so that then becomes this thing where it's a scary world to enter into. And so people sometimes just kind of get comfortable in their own dysfunction, and that becomes their friend, that becomes their home, that becomes their family, is the dysfunction that they've always known. And so there has been, thankfully, this big movement, if you will, towards mental wellness, right? So there's been this big movement we've seen over the past few years, especially in the African American community. We are starting to see more people talking about mental health, first and foremost, more than we've ever seen or heard of before to prior years. We're starting to see people, especially people who are considered celebrities and in the limelight, we're starting to see them talk about it more. And we know how pop culture is. All it takes is for a few celebrities to speak on it, and now it's cool. And so right now we're seeing this movement, right, of everyone's working on themselves, everyone is healing. More and more talks about therapy. You're seeing more commercials with different platforms that offer online therapy and things of that nature. And so we're seeing that people are starting to be more comfortable and open with the idea of therapy and going to therapy. But there is still a big gap there, because there's still so many people, especially in the African American community, who still has this mindset. We've all heard it. What happens in this house stays in this house. Most people grew up hearing things like that. And there's still a major mistrust when it comes to the African American community, when it comes to mental health. There's still this idea that you can't help me, you can't tell me nothing about my life, you can't tell me how to get, but you can't tell me anything. Which is why another reason I was very passionate about kind of putting myself out there as a clinician, and why I was so dedicated to becoming one, because I realized my people needed a clinician that looked like them. I've heard the horror stories of people telling me things that their therapists have said, past therapists, and how uncomfortable they were. They didn't feel like their therapist understood them, or they felt like, their therapist either minimized things or tried to oversimplify things. And so I realized how important it was for representation, for people to go to someone that looked like them. And there's been studies on that, how people prefer to go to someone that looks like them. And so you can imagine that the less of us that there were in the past, how that created this idea of mistrust. And there's already this big mistrust in the African American community when it comes to any type of profession that may be like a service profession, anything that could potentially even look like medical. That also had a mistrust for African Americans, and rightly so, just because of things that have happened in the past. And it was a very European dominated field for many years. And so it makes sense as to why there was so much pushback to kind of becoming a part of the mental health realm, and entering into that for the healing purposes. So the more of us that started to enter into the field, I think it kind of gave African Americans a sense of like, oh, you mean I can work with a therapist who may understand me better, who may just based off of our experiences in life may get me and what I'm going through. And that started to create major openings. Then you have things like, therapy for Black girls starting to, emerge. And that's a platform that I'm also on. And, Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, who's also located right here. She's a psychologist in Atlanta. And she created this amazing platform where, more and more Black professionals, mental health professionals, could have a directory, and people could go look up that directory and find people that look like them. And that's become a major thing. And so with things like that, we're starting to see this major uprising of people coming to therapy. So it's a beautiful thing, but there's still a struggle, y'all. It still amazes me. I was literally just telling someone this the other day that it's amazing to me how much you have to try to convince people to take care of themselves. Like, you would think that if someone's telling you like, no, I'm giving you permission to heal and to work on yourself, to do self-care, to work on self, it's like, no, I don't deserve that, or I don't have time for that. How do you not have time for rejuvenation? How do you not have time to pour back into yourself? How do you feel like you don't deserve that? You're a whole human being. You can't even function if you don't rejuvenate. So how do you think you don't deserve rejuvenation? How do you think you don't deserve self-care? How do you think you don't deserve healing? And you'll be surprised how that is such a major thing, how people will give me so much pushback when I tell them, so you need more self-care. It's just like, oh, I don't have time. I have this, I have that. I have this person that I got to care for. And I always have to give people the airplane analogy. Like, hey, remember how they on a plane, how they tell you got to put the mask on yourself first before you put the mask on someone else, because you may potentially die in the middle of trying to get their mask on. And then if you die and they die, then you're both dead, versus if you can at least get it on you first, now you're more able to help other people. I constantly have to break that down to people. that you have to be willing to put the mask on yourself first. And that's not you being selfish. That's actually the most selfless thing you can do, because now you are capable of helping those around you. And the people that need you and depend on you now can have you, versus getting some worn down version of you that you're trying so desperately to spread yourself thin to give to others. And you're not giving your best at that point. But again, you'll be super surprised how difficult it is for people to get that. And I think that ties very heavily in the African American community, because there is this idea that we are more valuable the more we produce. And because of that, if I'm not producing something, if I'm not constantly working, if I'm not constantly giving of myself, if I'm not constantly doing this, if I'm not always busy, then I therefore am less valuable. So this whole self-care thing, this time to myself, yeah, like I don't have time for that, because if I sit and I rest, I'm not valuable anymore. My value then decreases if I'm sitting here for too long. People feel guilty for rest. Mind blowing. But again, it is a mindset, one that I hope and pray that we can continue to work on releasing. I have to tell people all the time, oh, honey, take the cape off. Take the cape off. Trust and believe you are no one's superhero. You are very much human. And I need you to accept your humaneness. But people struggle to let down and set down the cape. It's very difficult for people. But I hope with time, people can learn the value of setting down the cape, and learning that the same energy that you put towards helping other people and pouring yourself out to other people and doing so much, to learn to find the value in doing that for self. That we are deserving and that we are worthy to be able to rest ourselves, to rest our minds, to rest our bodies, to rest our hearts, that we deserve, or to rest our spirits, that we deserve to do that. And that we deserve to heal ourselves. And there's a lot of healing that has to be done. There's a lot of brokenness. If anyone's ever followed Dr. DeGreer, she's big on, she wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, powerful stuff. And she ties back how much of the stress and trauma that we see in the African American community today, how much that stems back to slavery, and how there was never any intervention. We just let slaves free, and then we let them into society. And there was no processing of that trauma. There was no therapist there to say, hey, let's talk about this. And so you have years and years of passed down trauma, to the point that now, even though we are far removed from the initial trauma of slavery, we are still dealing with the repercussions that come with that. Just a lot of brokenness, a lot of things that have been placed in our minds about who we are as a people. And so there's just a lot that goes into that. And we see a lot of the remnants of the effects of that to this day. And she does a beautiful job of tying it all together, and just she does it beautifully. I can't do it any justice, but that just goes to show just how broken we are. We are talking about generational trauma at this point, and that's a whole new level of trauma. On top of the trauma that we experience in our own lives, compacted with the trauma that has been placed on us from generations before us. So it's a lot to process. It's a lot to deal with. And so we are definitely needing to continue to have these types of discussions to push it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, that's interesting, Tish, that you say that, because you said it's, I'm sorry, but I just want to go back to the book's name. You said it's Post-Traumatic Slavery?
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Slave Syndrome. Wow.
So it's Dr. Joy DeGraw. She is phenomenal. I mean, like in every aspect of her movement as she speaks and represents. I'm just hoping that I get her to Kansas in August. That's my plan. But I was looking at, I would ask you, Tish, when we look at why is declaring racism a health crisis? Why is it important to declare racism a health crisis within the nation? And you kind of alluded to it when you spoke on the 14 and 17 generations of slavery on of trauma, on top of the trauma that those citizens are carrying right now or being affected by right now. And how do we align communities and government to understand that it takes all of us to put a stop to this? It's not just one body, but all bodies that must transform this. So can you give us a little bit of information on that? Come on, talk to me, baby. Talk to me.
It is a health crisis because it weighs on you. There is a heaviness to racism. Um, and it's so unspoken, like, but we don't talk enough about it, but you feel it in your body. There is a feeling that you get every time that you may get a certain look, or people say something that is backhanded, or that is a microaggression. It's a heaviness that comes with, going back to the whole, the double consciousness, right? Like this idea that you have to be one person in this space and one person in another space. That weighs on you. Like, that is heavy, because you feel like you are not being true to yourself at that point. And you feel like if you are true to yourself, then that's looked at negatively. And that plays with your psyche. And when your mind is not in a good space, your body is not in a good space. And there is such a heaviness that weighs on so many people in this country because of racism. We have to be willing to talk about that, because it's such a heavy burden. And then when you're so then you have this heavy burden, and then you're told, well, that's not even real. So you have to heal. You got to deal with a burden that people tell you doesn't even exist.
So I love that you brought that up, because it's a heavy burden, right? And people act as though it's not real. And you said the piece where you're like, come on, self-care. Like, you need to take care of yourself. Girl, you got to do this, right? And we asked the question of, how could people not understand this? But if you've been trained and developed and boxed in, and that's been the only way, and every single time you tried to step out of that way, someone pulled you back in or shut you off, then you have that person that goes, this is what I gotta do, right? Even once they see the high levels of death, right? Even once they see the high levels of disease within certain bodies of people, they still fight, right? Oh, well, I got to do this and I got to do that. So from day in to day out, and sometimes I look at it and ask the question, is that still an offspring of what it looked like to be a slave on a plantation?
Let me ask you this. Let me ask this, because I know on April 1st, 2022, Tokyo himself stated that, actually, I'm joking. No, but I remember we were having a conversation. I was in Kansas City, Missouri, and this is when anyway, so we were having this conversation, and Tokyo, you said something that was very interesting. You said that you had never experienced racism before. So hearing a licensed therapist
by white people.
White people, yes, by white people. Okay. So by hearing that, by saying that, and then now hearing a licensed therapist say what she just said, what are your thoughts right now? What's going through your mind?
The first thing was a little bit of a aha to finally begin to understand what Black people go through. But
you say that as if you're not Black, though.
I don't identify. That's a whole other story. But anyways, like, as she's explaining this, it's helping me better understand what I observe in the market, in the day-to-day, at the gas station, in the malls, because a lot of times I look and I'm like, why are they so angry? Like, what's wrong? Like, calm down, But as the one thing she said that was really powerful just now was, you have to be this way in one setting and this way in another. And if you are true to yourself, it's seen as negative. And the first thing I thought was, loud and and all that. And if that's somebody's authenticity, now that I've gone through like my spiritual process, it's like, dang, like, well, I don't want to deny anybody their authenticity, but it is kind of seen as a negative because it's so aggressive. And then I look at I'll just use other people of color, Indians, Mexicans, Middle Eastern. Yeah, Indians, Mexicans, Middle Eastern, any other brown, that exists right now. And how they navigate, how they communicate, how they operate within a public space. And I don't see nearly as much aggression, But then she also tied in that there are things from the time of slavery that's been passed down through generations. So for me, hearing all this is very eye-opening. And how she explains it with kind of like a scientific background, that's how my mind works. I'm analytical. So she's actually speaking my language, which is opening my heart to better understand the Black condition.
I can appreciate your honesty on that, right? Because at the end of the day, I think something that we struggle with as a Black community is understanding that Black is not one. We're not one dimensional. That's the beautiful part of us, though. Like we are on a spectrum, and we look different, we talk different, we act different, and although we may have some common denominators, at the end of the day, like we are different. And again, that's what makes us beautiful, that we can be on an array, right? And that we can be on this spectrum. So I can appreciate your authenticity, even though it may not be received well. I'm sure may not be received well. But at the
I'm
end
usually
of the day,
the Simon of the American Idol. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get it, and it makes sense, and I think first of all, I'm glad that I could aid you in being able to see it from a different perspective, because I think that's why these conversations are important, because at the end of the day, we have to be willing to sit down and have these discussions so that we can see it from a different perspective, because I do think that has been the issue thus far. We haven't had enough discussion to where people can see how deeply rooted this thing goes, and even in the piece, and sometimes I think if the seed gets planted, perfect example, if once we all get off of here, if I tell you all, when you're driving next time, I want you to pay attention to all the red cars you see, magically you're going to start seeing a bunch of red cars on the highway, because I've literally planted the seed now and told you to look for them. So it's not that there's more red cars in production, but your brain is now focused on those because that is what I told you. And I feel like there is a lot of that happens in the African-American community, that there have been seeds that have been planted to say, hey, these people act like this. This is what they do. This is their mannerisms. This is how they talk. And now it's not that you just see more of it from African Americans, but because Hispanics are loud, Asians are loud. The Asian culture, their dialect, part of their language is the tone of which they say it. Could be a different word, right? So they can be extremely loud. If you ever seen two Puerto Ricans go at it, whoo, honey, don't get in the middle. But again, the point is, if we've already been told, hey, but look at those Black people over there all loud and doing all of this, bump the Asians over here yelling at each other, bump the Puerto Ricans over here yelling at each other, bump the Italians, because all of these people are loud. But because we all keep telling, but hey, but the Black people over there, you see how loud they are? Look at them over there in the corner just loud. Everybody else can be doing the same thing, but again, the seed got planted. So again, it may not necessarily be more of it, but again, that's just marketing, right? So the marketing seed got planted, and now your attention has been diverted to what we told you to pay attention to versus being able to see the total picture.
And the propaganda on that you spoke of started around the Beacon Brigade. When we go back to the 1700s, it was purposely planted and strategized. And so for us to believe a strategy that's been set out there instead of watching, especially when you're someone who strategically looks at everything from beneath it, you have to be able to see validly, like question self, like, why, when I see this, I believe it's all other people. And then you have to look at the culture of the people, the cultures, because within the Black body, there's not one culture, there's several cultures. And you have to go back and look at culturally how everything is done in tones, singing, movement. It's not that you just sit still and become this statue. Everything is done through a whole body experience. And so when we talk about mental illness and therapy for a Black-bodied society, I'm seeing that more are picking up on movement for the body, because Black culture, Black bodies heal through movement and not through being settled, but it's intentional movements. Give me some more.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful, that we're starting to recognize the need of the people, right? And in general, like we're we're learning to say, okay, so this is what we're seeing is a thing, and so let's make sure that we adjust to them. Like, multiculturalism has become a very big push in the field of counseling and mental health. And that goes across the board. That's not just for, race and ethnicity, but it's really been a big push, like being multiculturally competent. And in order to do so, that means you understand the cultures that you're working with, but you also are willing to tailor what you do with certain clients based on the culture of which they come from. And it helps you it helps you to build better rapport. But it also helps to make sure that you are reaching that person where they are. So I think that's beautiful, the whole movement of body. But I also, something I've realized with my clients too, they appreciate the ability of the realness, right? Like, when I'm in session, this is how I talk. Like, I'm not doing the whole, so tell me how you feel. Like, how did that make you feel? Yeah, that had to be tough. Like, that's not my approach. One thing I'm big on is being authentically me, no matter what space that I'm in. But that also means in that therapeutic space. And that's something that I have realized for my Black and brown clients. That's what they love. That's what they need. They've joked and told me, they was like, if I had one of those clients, if I had one of those therapists, I would not like you. And I'm like, exactly. But that's why you see me, because you want someone that you can connect to. And they always say that they appreciate that. I give it to them real. I give it to them raw. And again, I'm meeting them at their cultural need. And again, let me be clear. I will still adjust. Just because they're Black doesn't mean I treat every Black client the same. Again, I understand we are on a spectrum. So I will read them that first session and I'm like, yeah, I can be at a 10 with them. This one, I probably need to come down a couple notches. I probably can be at about a 5 with them. I probably can stay at a 5 with them. And I'm still going to be authentically me, but I'm going to meet them where they are. And I think that's what's super important.
Ebony, so what are your thoughts so far after hearing all of this? What's going through your mind? What's going through your brain? Because I'm curious to know what you're thinking, because I've seen you do a few of those finger points and a few head nods. So I want to know what you got going on, pretty girl. What's going on in your head?
You know what? My first, and I don't know why she briefly spoke on it, but my question is this: do you feel like, as a therapist, and I apologize, I'm hoarse, I've been doing some things today.
Sound beautiful.
Do you feel, thank you. My question is, as you look to the future of your profession, how much technology is too much technology? And what I mean by that is, obviously, when COVID hit, we had to figure out ways to keep the ball rolling in every profession, not just yours, mine, Prince's, Regina's. We had to figure it out. But do you feel like, because I know that there are several companies out now that their bottom foundation is being virtual. You can get care or therapy at any moment, any time, any day. Are you a grassroots person where you feel like there's more benefit to being in person? Or do you feel like, for instance, we're all sitting here virtually right now. Mind you, we're not all in therapy at the moment at the same time. But I guess when you look towards the future, do you see it's still being effective, but at some point you just have to put your foot down and say, okay, now we've lost the ability to keep it real and be one-on-one because we just done let technology take over, and you just don't feel like the results are going to be the same. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. I think that's an awesome question. So basically, it's twofold for me. So when the pandemic first hit and we had to figure things out and virtual had to become more of an option, prior to that, I was totally against virtual therapy. I was like, what is that? Like, what is this makeshift therapy you speak of?
Right.
So I was not for it in the least bit. And then I had to start doing it. And I was amazed at how I could still have those deep therapeutic moments with my clients just like this. And it blew me because I was convinced I was going to miss some type of body language cue, that I wasn't going to be able to read the mood the same way. And I was completely blown away with how wrong I was. And I've had this conversation with colleagues that I still can't believe how wrong I was about the effectiveness of counseling via virtually. So I think it is effective and it does have its benefits. There's some people I probably would have never worked with if it wasn't for virtual. So I'm grateful for that. And I see the benefit. On the flip side, though, this whole movement of just trying to push for online counseling in general, or these different platforms, if you will, I don't like it. I hear no boundaries. First of all, this whole idea of you can get therapy anytime, anywhere. No, ma'am. I wish my clients would. You stop getting responded to after a certain time. Like, that's boundaries. Like, that's where I have my self-care, right? So that constant access, to me, that's what gets concerning, because now I'm worried about the clinicians, which, if you talk to many clinicians who work for those platforms, completely burned out. But we're not talking about that. They're going to keep putting the commercials out there, but those clinicians are underpaid and overworked. And so that's my issue. Therapy's not meant to be, you're not meant to have full access to me. I joke and tell my clients all the time, honey, this is the one job where your goal is to eventually get fired. Like, I need you to not need me at some point, because if you got to constantly need me for years and years on end, then something isn't quite right. If you have full access to me all day, every day, I'm not doing my job. You need to be able to function and live life without me. And
so,
exactly.
So with that being said, because I've never heard that before, like the goal is to get fired. Like, typically when you have a job, honey, you want to hold on to that job as long as you can, especially if it's paying you well. So going, like, I guess the initial part, when would you say a person should seek out a therapist? Like, when does a person need a therapist?
That's the money question right there, right? So anything can be a reason to go to therapy. And I say that off rip because people, the first time you mention to somebody they need to go to therapy, we've seen this on TV shows. We've seen this in real life. You go to mention therapy to somebody, I don't need therapy. I don't need therapy. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need to talk to nobody. Can't nobody tell me about my life. I'm good. Right? And it's like, honey, if your boss is stressing you out, you can go to therapy. If you're not really sure where your relationship is headed, like, do I really want to be with this person? You can go to therapy. If you feel like, okay, I'm having a spat with my sibling and we just not in a good space right now, and I'm struggling with how to deal with that because this my ace boom boom, but we not seeing each other eye to eye right now. You can go to therapy. It doesn't have to be these deep-rooted issues. I was abused for 20 years of my life, or, I'm a product of rape, or I was molested for X amount of years. Like, that doesn't always have to be your motivating factor to go to therapy. It doesn't have to be this, okay, it all started when I was 5. Like, that doesn't have to be your reason to go. It can be the simplest of day-to-day things that you're like, you know what? I feel like I'm starting to burden my friends and family by talking about this thing. It's bothering me. And I feel like I want a space where I can just be completely transparent, say whatever comes to my mind. Some of my sessions with my clients are vent sessions. They just need to come in there and get some stuff off their chest. And when they leave, they're like, oh, okay, I feel better. I just had to say that. But I have nowhere else that I can say that without it having repercussions. But I can say it in this space, and I know that it's going to be safe here. That's it. Something that simple. Therapy is just simply a safe space. That's it. So if you need a safe space to say some things, you can go to therapy. You're ready for therapy. That's all it takes.
I'm glad you.
I have a quick question. I do have a quick question. So you know how when we go to the doctor, we would initially go see a PCP. If the PCP finds something specific that they need to refer us to, they refer us to this specialist or this. For our viewers watching, because I know someone's going to ask this question, when you're initially looking into therapy, particularly if you're a virgin to the field altogether, you just don't know where you're going, who you should talk to, you don't know nothing. Should you speak to someone specific to the issue? Because, we all know there's marriage counselors. Should you go to someone specifically, or is there some type of, title where you just go see a general person first? How does that work?
That's a great question, actually. So you always want to go to a specialist. If you are dealing with grief, go to someone who specializes in grief. If you are looking for marriage counseling, go to a marriage counselor. If you are looking for familial discord, go to someone who specializes in that. Whatever it is that you are struggling with, you definitely want to, if you have a specific issue, let me be clear, because for some people, I've been getting a lot of these lately. I just feel like I just need to work on some things. Like, I'm at a point in my life, I'm realizing like I need to work on some things and I need to get myself together, right? If it's general like that, then it doesn't matter. Because the reality is, us as therapists, whatever our specialty is, we're going to know the general understanding of counseling. So if you have a general issue, yeah, just like your general PCP, you do that. But if you have something specific that you are looking for, that you know that you need work on, then you want to go to that specialist. Because, like, for instance, if you're coming with a substance abuse issue, to me, I'm going to refer you out to a substance abuse counselor. I will tell you, that's not my ministry. If you want your child to be seen, I'm referring to somebody who does play therapy or specifically works with children, because again, that's not my ministry. So we all have our things that we specialize in, and usually on our websites or platforms that are like referral platforms, you usually can see what someone is qualified in, like what are their specialties that they work on. So that kind of helps to narrow down for you when you are looking for someone. And even if you don't see something that states what their listed specialties are, always reach out and ask, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. So is this something that you specialize in? I always get that question. Hey, this is what I need. Do you do that? And I'll tell them, yes, I do. And if I don't, I'm very honest with them. I will say that is not something that I work a lot with. I'm not very familiar with it, but hey, I do have a referral for you. I know this person does it. So here's someone else who specializes in that may be a better fit for you.
So as we get ready to wind down, honey, first off, thanks for coming. Like, girl.
Thanks for having me.
So as we get ready to wind down, it's a very, we had this conversation beforehand, but you and I didn't talk about this. So I saw this show. It's called Queen Sugar, and in the show, there's this character. Her name is Charlie Bordelon West. Well, Charlie Bordelon. And she says that she got very upset, and she said that college is no longer about kids going to school to get an education. It is about connections. We had this discussion, the four of us. I want to know, do you believe that college is actually the same thing? Like, is it just to get connections?
College?
Mm-hmm.
No, I can't. I feel like that's a blanket statement, and I try not to make those. I can't make that blanket statement and just say that college is just about connections. But I do think there should be more focus on the idea of making connections in college, because I don't think that's what was pushed prior to. It was all about education. And the reality is, not trying to be funny, like education always isn't going to be your answer to get to where you need to be in life. So I think if we're honest with people and tell them, oh, but it's not just about that education, you're definitely going to make some amazing connections if you use it right. And that's something that you can, utilize later, and that'll hold more value than that piece of paper that you're about to work for. I feel like if we push it in that way, then I think that's a more honest approach. But would I just say it's all about connections? No, because in a field like mine, like I'm not in one of those fields where it's like people can say, oh, you didn't even need a degree for this. Like you can't even get licensed in the state of Georgia or any state. You can't get licensed without a master's. So my education was very much needed for me to get to where I am today. So mine was about education, because if I wasn't paying attention in class, I wouldn't be able to help people. And so I can't just say it's not about education. Depending on whatever field you're in, you still have to learn something. You learn, it's a degree for a reason. It's a reason it's a specialty. So I still think the education is important. I think people just need to make sure that whatever they really want to do you need a formal education for it? And I think that's where too many people mess up. People just go to school because somebody done pushed them and told they need to get a degree, and now they didn't spend all this money and they wanted to do something else. So I think that's what it's more about.
So in wrapping up, what would your final thoughts be to all of the listeners and viewers that are going to be watching this episode? What would be the one thing that you want them to take away?
To not fear therapy, y'all. Don't fear it. When I tell you, it is the most beautiful process. And this is someone I've sat on both sides. So not only am I a therapist, but I have a therapist. Super proud of that.
I do too. Yeah.
And when I tell you, like, so I've sat on both sides of this coin, and it's beautiful on both sides. It's beautiful to watch people heal, and it's beautiful to be the one doing healing herself. And so do not fear this process. You are missing out on probably the most beautiful and amazing thing you could ever experience in your life, is finding you, rediscovering you. Sometimes that's what people go to therapy for. I'm at a crossroad. I don't know what's next in my life. And that's a beautiful thing. So therapy is beautiful. Do not fear it, people. Like, I know change is scary, And I'm not about to sit here and act like therapy is not a hard pill to swallow at times. Your toes will be stepped on a lot. Your feelings gonna be hurt sometimes. It's gonna be hard looking at yourself in the mirror, having to face some things. But y'all, I tell you, it is worth it. So do not fear therapy. It is beautiful. And just remember, though, your therapist is not there to fix you. They are there to help you to fix yourself. And so therapy works as much as you do. So don't go in there expecting somebody to alakazoo, alakazam, and you just be healed and whole, and you walk out the door and you walk out back into your life. That is not how it works. If it did, I would have started with my family. So
what was the girl?
alakazoo.
Typhicus tortitis.
Don't get me started because I'll start doing Harry Potter spells. But that's it, y'all. Don't fear therapy. Don't fear. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and know that you still have to work.
We appreciate you.
We appreciate you, girl. Thank you so much, Tish. And I can tell you what's next. What's next is Dr. Woods. Okay, if you ain't married by then, but Dr. Woods, honey. Yes, so that's what's next.
Congratulations.
For you. Yes.
Ahead of time, we gonna claim it.
Come on now. So that is our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for joining us on today. We appreciate you all. Make sure that if something resonated with you, make sure that you share it. Download it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, basically everywhere that you want to listen to something. We are there. Okay. We're on YouTube. So this is our episode of The Chat. And you know, we always say, if you have something that you want to talk about, especially if it's juicy, let's talk about that. Regina, get us out of here.